because I don't think anyone should convince anyone about anything or why you're such a big fan to this team. And the first word he said right away was it's belonging. What happens if Apple or Nike would have that kind of fans that a football team have, for example? And I think it's actually possible. We have bias and we have assumptions around things. So sometimes when we are going to do research, we have an idea about what we think already or what we want to find.
What's your thoughts on the PayPal rebranding?
Oh my God. I have not, to be honest, I have not.
Hello, Anneli. It's super nice having you on the show. I'm one of your fans, but for people who might not know you or your work, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm very happy to be here too. I'm Anneli Hansson and I'm a brand strategist. I'm also a public speaker and an educator, and I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden. And so what I do is I have around 30 years experience from this industry as opposed to running my own agency. And today I put in all my time and my love and my effort in helping creatives learn brand strategies so they can get paid for their thinking. So that's what I do.
Amazing. I'm so stoked about this conversation. Let's start right off the bat with inspiration. What inspired you to choose this field of design and continue in it for so long?
Okay, I'm not a designer. I'm a brand strategist and a marketing strategist. So I'm
Yes,
not. The field, when I say a field of design,
in the
for
field of
me it's
design,
more.
branding overall.
Yeah, so it's more for me the building a brand, and the reason why I think it's so important and so fun to work with that is because it's all about people. It's all about human connections.
Right.
And I'm not so interested, to be honest, in the more financial part of it. I'm not super interested uh, in numbers and Excel sheets. That's not where I really excel. Where I'm really good at understanding people, how brands can connect with people, and how we can use more of the right side of the brain, like more imagination and creative thinking and intuition to build that emotional connection with people. So that's why I've been in this industry for 30 years, because I just love working with creatives and I love working with brands, helping them to connect with their audience.
That's great. Brand strategy sits at the junction of, you would say, branding, marketing, business, design thinking. Annalie, how do you think a designer should work on conveying the value of strategy to clients, bosses?
Yeah, okay, that's a challenge in just the use of words, because I don't think anyone should convince anyone about anything. So that's the first challenge. And this
Makes
is
sense.
not just you. It's the most common question I get all the time is, how can I convince my clients to do strategy first? And what I would say is that if you have to convince people, then you have a really difficult time to start out there. I think it's really important that we actually educate people from start so they know more. I prefer to work with people who appreciate um, that they want to build a brand, and they want to work with people who know how to build a brand. So if they don't know that, then I'm not like in the industry of, you know, they work on convincing people. So I don't want to spend my time arguing with people if they should have a brand or not. It's not my choice. If they want to have a commodity and they want to compete with price, that's totally fine for me. I'm not just their person to work with. So that's how I see it.
Makes
And
sense.
the way you can help people to see the value is to ask really good questions. So if we think about instead, what is the outcome of doing a brand strategy? So we get clarity around who we are, our mission, our vision, why we even exist, like our true kind of DNA for the brand, like who we are, our personality, what we believe in, our values. If we have clarity around that, we also know who we want to talk to, our target audience, and what's important
Right.
for them. And then we know how to position ourselves in the market so we can stand out from our competitors, so we don't have to compete with price. So if we ask questions about all these things, how do people perceive you today? Who is your target audience? Who's your biggest competitor? Like, you can ask a lot of things. And when you ask that, they often get clarity around that. Oh, maybe we don't know all of these things, or we're not used to putting words to it. And then they sometimes get back to you and said, is this something you can help me with? So I think it's a foundation for everything we do. It doesn't matter if it's marketing activities or if it's brand identity or if it's branding. Everything we do needs to be a solid foundation for. And that's first a business strategy and then a brand strategy.
Makes total sense. You would say it's more about conveying your capabilities, your skills, and the clarity that you can bring instead of trying to convince someone, right?
Absolutely. And I want them to understand it themselves. You know, the difference between consultant and being a coach is that a coach asks questions and let the person get to the insights themselves.
Right.
While consultant and advisor tell people what to do. And there are different needs for that. I mean, a lot of people who hire me, they do it because I have a long experience, so they want my advice.
Right.
But when it comes to selling, then I have more of a coaching approach where I prefer to ask questions and to make it around them instead and make them feel like this is something they want help with.
That makes sense. At the end of the day, it's about understanding where the client wants to go and, as you said, asking the right questions so that they can themselves guide themselves towards them.
Yeah, so they also understand that by not having a strategy, you're basically guessing that the things you put in your money in and invest your money is the right thing to do. So you need to have some kind of foundation. It's like building a house.
Right.
And you not hire an architect and have a blueprint how to build it. Just let people start building. We would never do that. But we
Right.
do that with marketing and with design. And I think that's a waste of money.
You're right. That will be a really expensive guess if we
Yes,
make a house without an architect.
exactly. So we are the architects when we are the strategists.
At the core, what makes it, what changes, or what do you think at the core makes a customer into a true fan?
Okay, so then we probably talk about business to consumer and not business to business.
Right.
Maybe. I don't know so many who have fans. Maybe some people do
Maybe.
are fans to other people. But when we talk about business to consumer, I can share like an example, something I thought about
Sure.
yesterday that was really interesting. I went to a football game. You know, here in Sweden, it's soccer. It's like in Europe, so it's not American football. So I went to a game yesterday, my favorite team, and I'm just like blown away how many fans they have and the culture that surrounds that team. And it doesn't really matter who the players are, they come and go, but the team is always there. And they have this extremely sense of belonging. So I asked one of the people who I know, who's a really big fan, like, what do you think is the core of why you're such a big fan to this team? And the first word he said right away was, it's belonging. Like, okay, interesting. So if you would say a brand, another brand, like a product brand, do you know any other brand that you feel this way for? And he's like, no. He's like, it's not like I feel this way about Nike. I like their shoes, but I'm definitely not a fan. And I thought that was so interesting. So I'm actually writing on an article right now. It's more of how can brands create fans? Because maybe they need to create really big great communities and a tribe to create that fan, true fans. So I think that's interesting to see, like, can really, like, companies, can they create fans or not? Or is it just something that people say?
Right. It's something that people, or brands rather say, aspire to have for sure. core true fans, but it's
Hmm.
super difficult because that association factor is so difficult to achieve with a product. Like with Barcelona or Liverpool, at the end of the day, they are something abstract, but you still feel that belonging. With
Yes.
Nike or iPhone, it's difficult.
Yeah, but maybe it is possible, but maybe
Maybe.
a lot of brands are about expressing your own individual status
Right.
more than it is about belonging. I think this is culture too. It might be, not to offend anyone in the US, but they are a little bit more focused on the individuals. And
Hmm.
I can see from the culture I'm from here in Sweden, we're much more for the community, for like taking care of each other. Like togetherness is like our thing. So maybe it's a little bit different cultures too. I don't know. But I think it would be really interesting to see what happens if Apple or Nike would have that kind of fans that a football team have, for example. And I think it's actually possible.
You're not wrong. I mean, the individualist versus the collectivist cultures. I'm from India, and
Mm,
so it's a similar kind of collective community based space here as well.
yeah.
And yeah, it makes sense. Another thing that comes to
Mm,
mind when we're having this conversation is at times when even we're not fans, we become fans when we have to kind of defend that product, become instantaneous fans for some reason of
yeah.
Apple. Let's say when someone tells me that Samsung is better, I just
Yeah.
become a iPhone fanboy.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I think it's one of those things that in situations of, you can say, conflict or competitiveness, that we become
Hmm.
fans of products.
Yeah. But I'm thinking also, what if, and this is like maybe a little deep, but what if they would do something that you actually really don't like? If that
True.
company is doing something or they do a product that you absolutely not like, how loyal would you be if you compare
Hmm.
to the loyalty you have towards a team, for example?
Right. Makes sense. It won't be that same level of disappointment either, I believe. Will be fairly detached.
Yeah. So it's kind of
Yeah.
it is interesting in a way to I thought about
Hmm.
it a lot. Like how can we use that? Because one brand that actually have that the same, almost like a team, is Harley Davidson.
Hmm. That's a good
They
example.
do
Yes.
have fans, they do have a tribe, and they have tattoos and they belong together.
Mhm.
And I think they are one of the brands, companies that really succeed doing this for real.
That, yeah, you're right. That's a good example. Would you say Patagonia has something similar going on?
I don't think they have a tribe yet. I think they have individuals that likes to be connected to that because it makes them buy into an identity of caring about the environment. So you kind of borrow a little bit of that identity. I had Patagonia clothes for like 30 years, 40 years, but now it feels a little bit more like a statement that I stand up for, the planet. So I think they have it, but I don't think they have the same kind of fans. I don't think they have a tribe yet.
Makes sense. Anneli, there must have been learnings and insight that you have gained over the years that you think only your experience has taught you. Why don't you
Mm.
share like top five such insights?
Oh my God, for 30 years back, top five.
Yeah, it'll take some time. Yeah.
Can you can you can you be a little bit more specific about a topic? Because I feel like there's like too many things for me to even.
Let's say in the topic of understanding consumers from a strategy perspective.
Mm, okay. One thing that I learned by experience is that I thought you could ask people what they want, and then people will tell you. That's one thing. Most people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So they also don't know what to tell you about what they want. So instead of asking people what they want, we should really focus on their challenges and their fears and their pain points and maybe their dreams more. But they
Hmm.
really don't know what kind of product or things they want because I haven't seen it yet. So that's one thing. Another thing is that it's really difficult to do group interviews like focus groups because I learned from experience too, and from data, when you can say, you can look at what people say, and then you can look at the numbers, what people actually buy, that I had, that I could do when I worked as a CMO. I saw that people said one thing and then they did something else. So a lot of people say that they are very, like, they think about the environment, they want to buy organic food, eco-friendly food. A lot of people say they don't eat so much meat, but then when you actually look at what they're buying, it's not at all. And this often happens when we're around people. So we want to look good in front of other people. Sometimes it's not even conscious. It's not that people are evil. It's just that subconscious, it happens too. So that's maybe one thing too. How many was that? Like 2, 3 things. And then another thing that I also know, it's, you have to be really careful about bias, which means like we have bias and we have assumptions around things. So sometimes when we are going to do research, we have an idea about what we think already or what we want to find. So most of the data we get and most of the insights, like things people tell us that we don't know yet, we try to kind of see it from the lens of what we want to see. So that's confirmation bias, and that's not a really good thing. So what I think is important is, and this is where AI comes in, and actually ChatGPT is really good. I don't recommend people to do research on ChatGPT, not when it comes to human understanding, like human behavior. But what is good is that I actually had a conversation with ChatGPT about this. So I have developed kind of a framework how to do research together with ChatGPT, which is kind of funny. So what's important is when we do research, we want to start with qualitative research before quantitative, because we need to understand something first, and then we kind of see, is this not just 8-10 people who say this? Then we can try it on 500 people maybe, you know? So what we want to do is to find like core challenges, pain points that comes from people that we interview on a much deeper level. So when we see someone, you know, we can read face, you know, expressions, and we see someone, is that really true what they're saying now? We can go deeper and we can really find those like insights. You start there when you want to make sure that, for example, create a persona or a customer avatar. So you start by first facilitating with the client. So you together create like a prototype of your avatar. And then you go out and you do interviews. You know, you observe people, because this is still not AI. It's like it's you understanding human behavior. But what I do then, the next step is actually to invite ChatGPT, because then I can take all these interviews and I can put it into chat or some other AI, and I can get help to structure it, to see patterns, to see words that comes up, to start to see like different things, how they're connected. That's really good. And then I take that and I think about the insights, like, what does that really mean? And then I add on my own critical thinking and being human. And then from that, I can look into data and research that chat or some other AI can find on websites or reports and other things. So I use AI to be more effective in my work, but I don't use it to replace my thinking. And that's really important, because I feel today that a lot of people create everything on ChatGPT, including customer avatars, and they get way too generic.
You're right.
So that's one thing that I learned recently, that we just need to work with AI, but we are the creative director, we are the strategist.
The AI question was about to come for sure. I kept it towards the last, but yeah, glad that we're talking about it, because
Yeah.
it is the elephant in the room, and it's a phenomenal new technology, and the possibilities with it are super immense. But before that, it's so interesting when you say this, right? Qualitative data over quantitative. Starting
Yeah.
with qualitative first, that makes sense. When you talked about bias as well, there's this interesting study called Ash's conformity test, wherein there were like 5 people who were actors and one real person
Yeah.
who didn't have idea about what was happening. The
Yeah.
researcher would give really simple questions, like there would be 2 lines, one would be shorter, one would be longer, And the first few iterations, everyone is writing the true answers. After that, all the actors are writing the wrong answer, and the actual guy looks around, is a bit confused, and he writes the wrong answer.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Even though he can just see it that there's one short line and one
Hmm.
longer line. And that's so impactful, right? That
Yeah.
especially when you talked about focus groups, it's so difficult being able to do research in that way,
Yeah.
getting the core insights.
And another thing with ChatGPT that we have to remind ourselves about, it is still a language model.
Right.
And I use critical thinking a lot when I use it, because you also have to remind yourself that everything you write, especially now when it gets more and more advanced, it will actually they know the things you already said. So when you write something and you ask for an advice or you create an avatar, whatever it is, it will have a lot of bias. So people think it's
That's
objective because it's a robot, but it's a lot of bias because it's your bias, because you already put in the information. So when you start to see like, oh, this sounds like me. Yes, it is, because it is you, because it used your words that you already been using. So I think this is really important for us to understand that there are things like imagination, that creativity, some critical thinking, that like really creative problem solving, then we just don't take the answers and do something from that. We take the answers and then we think about what is the real insight behind this that we didn't know before. And that is kind of advanced thinking, but it's based on us and our ability to read people and to connect with people on a deeper level. And I'm just afraid that people will not put in time doing that because they think they can just ask ChatGPT. And especially if you want to be a strategist, because otherwise everything will be look the same after a while. It would totally lack personality. And I don't think some people can see the difference when they read a text, but they can feel that it feels a little off, like it doesn't really touch your heart. And we
Feels
see
like
that more
it's
and more
not meant
now.
for anyone.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like even when you write, I'm so tired of writing posts in LinkedIn, for example, and you just see there's like robot automation comments.
Right.
People don't even write real comments. And I just want to block people when I see it, because I'm like, I'm not interested.
Amazing. What are other AI applications or usages in which you use AI?
I mean, I use mostly ChatGPT, to be honest, because I'm not a designer, but my team also work with other AI tools, and I don't even know all of them. But I know, for example, that Midjourney has been really good when it comes to the more visual side. But because I'm not a designer, I feel like I would love to do that. I think I could actually be kind of good at it because I have good imagination.
Sure.
But if I would start doing that, that would be a rabbit hole, and I would spend my entire, days doing that. And like, I don't have the time. But so I know that we have cloud and there are different AIs that my team is using, but I'm mostly into ChatGPT because I think that's been most helpful for me.
Amazing. I would want to know something from you, which is in which part of the process do you think should be, young designers and strategists should be the most cautious and careful in terms of doing the brand strategy?
I mean, maybe in all parts.
Right.
Because I think what we need to understand is that there's a lot of people calling themselves strategists right now and brand strategists. And I don't think everyone knows what a brand strategy really is doing.
I agree.
So if we just go back and talk a little bit about that, like, and this is probably different from different countries too, and depending how big an agency is or if you work in a company. But if you want to be the one who help companies to develop their brand, that means that you are the one who helps them develop their business.
That's true.
It doesn't mean that you do a logo and a brand identity for them, because that's not brand strategy. So you are responsible for helping them develop their business. And there's a lot of designers out there who have never studied business, marketing, or know how to facilitate. So to call yourself a brand strategist when you do a logo and brand identity is very delusional because it's not what you do. And it confuses people and it confuses other people in the industry. So I'm not saying it to judge people, but I think it's important that we know what it really is. So what that is, developing a brand, to do that, before we even start designing or writing messaging or writing storytelling or do advertising, we need to be able to do a couple of things. We need to know how to facilitate with a client. That could be like with one person, preferably the person who owns the company, if it's a small company. And it can also, so it's facilitation is really important. We talked about research. That's also really important because you can't just guess, and you should never give advice without actually knowing some insights first. So those two things are really, really important. And then I also think it's important to know some business, understanding of business and marketing, because when you build a brand, the first step you actually do is to create awareness, brand awareness, that the brand even exists. Because if people don't know about the brand, you don't have a brand. So, and brand awareness is built mostly with marketing. So that's where it starts. So the marketing is about getting people to know about you. So first, marketing is much more than tactic. It's actually understanding what kind of products are we even going to develop, who are we talking to, and what are the needs out there in the market. Then we develop products and services, and then people need to know about them and about that we exist. That's marketing. And then how we show up, like with all touch points with brand identity comes in. It's like the logo, the packaging, the experience of the brand when we already bought it. That's branding for me.
Right.
So it's important that branding and marketing are like siblings. They're very intertwined, and we need to do both of them to build a brand. So this is what I teach when I teach brand strategy. And you don't have to be 20 years in a business to do this. You can be a totally beginner in the beginning of your career. But if you learn how to facilitate, you learn how to do research, and you actually have a framework to follow, then you will be able to do that even if you're a little bit younger. So I think it's just really sad that not all design schools already teach this, because they don't. And marketing schools are much better because that's where you actually learn how to build a brand. The bad side of that, which I can also often see, and I hear it a lot from people actually in India, is that sometimes marketing is very short term, sales driven, when it's all about numbers and everything you can measure.
You're
But when you want to build a brand, there's two parts. One is to build awareness and the value, so you don't have a commodity, so you never have to compete with price. We call that brand marketing. It's really difficult to measure and definitely short term, almost impossible. And then we have performance marketing, which is what drives sales. That's often in digital channels, and people are obsessed by seeing the numbers because they get the result right away. But if you put in all your eggs, like there's often like 60-40 where you want to do brand marketing and then performance marketing. But a lot of people put in all their budget in performance marketing. What happens then is that you don't have any brand that you're building value and awareness around. You're just selling. So you will end up anyway as having to compete with price. So I think that's there's not so many people who talk about the intersection between branding and marketing, which I think I do. And that's how I teach
Yes.
it. And maybe that's still a little bit unique with my approach.
Right. And I remembered myself of this framework. I think I saw your presentation in the Brand Builder Summit. that you
Mm-hmm.
talk. And there was one of this slide that I still remember, which is brand strategy is the junction of branding, marketing,
Yeah.
business, and design thinking. That's a
Yes.
good way of thinking about it. Yes.
Yeah. I
And
mean, it's my approach. Not everyone would agree,
yeah,
but
but it
it's
makes
my
sense.
approach from working with all these different things.
Mhm.
And I have an education also in it, but I also have a lot of experience. So
Mhm.
when you see, I can see the sweet spot, but if you only come from one side, of course, you will see that perspective.
You're right. Also, you're completely right about India, the India story, which is, I think this is the first phase of Indian startups coming up, which is
Mm,
where the implementation of more branding, brand strategy,
yeah.
the thinking of brand from a long-term sustainable
Yes.
perspective, it's growing right now. Before that, we had huge business houses, conglomerates. It's the first phase
Hmm.
of startups. So yeah, it's a fun place to be
And I
honest.
mean, I think it's amazing. And I love the
Yeah.
market in India where there's a lot of really, really cool tech startups, for example. But I can see, I don't want to mention names, but there was one software that I signed up for example,
Mhm.
where they were really pushy when it comes to sales. But then the experience was horrible and they didn't really care about me as a client whatsoever. So they just kind of tricked me into buy it, but they didn't create a brand experience at all. And that's what I mean when it's like when you build a brand, you need to be aware of how you connect with people so they feel like this is so much more value beyond just the product. And I think especially when we work on a global market, we need to also know that in other markets, especially where I am in Northern Europe, and I know in the US, we might have different preferences. And for us, it might be really important with branding and that brand experience. So if you work really short term and just drive sales, that will not connect on a deeper level with us as customers, which will make it really will cost a lot if you just have to drive sales all the time and people never come back. They just buy one time.
Right. Makes total sense actually. And I just hope that with time we're able to inculcate those parts of design. And also you can say this as simple customer empathy as well. I hope
Yes.
those get
It's
inculcated more
customer
in this
service.
space.
I think a lot of
Mhm.
people know about customer service. And if you think about you going on vacation or whatsoever,
Mhm.
you don't just buy the travel ticket there, you buy the whole experience, the
Right.
vacation. So you want to make sure that actually every touch point you do is an amazing experience. So you're not just coming back maybe one more time, you also start talking about it with other people.
And it's actually pretty contrasting in a way because the Indian hospitality sector is actually known around the world.
Yeah.
And on the opposite side, yeah, I understand it.
Yes. So I think that's if you can use that knowledge and
Mhm.
culture
Mhm.
that you already have, it's amazing. But we also need to give a lot of grace to people and to startups in India because
Mhm.
it's also in the beginning phase. It's still a developing country and
Mhm.
it will get there. But I think to have a little faith and trust in that if you would, as a brand, really have a clear strategy, so you know that you will make a more money. It just need to be a little bit more long term when you build the value, and you will be able to compete with brands all around the world, not on price, but on other things around value. So I think it will get there. It just takes a little bit time.
Real quick, I would want to know you put quite some focus, on sustainability and the planet. And why don't you
Hmm.
expand on that? And what does it essentially mean for brands?
Yeah. Okay. So since 2011, then I started to work as a CMO and then
Mhm.
CBO, which is the Chief Brand Officer and Chief Marketing Officer for a
Yes.
multi-billion-dollar brand who's
Mhm.
Northern Europe's biggest when it comes to agriculture and food and
Yes.
machine and energy. It's called Lantmännen. And the reason why I got so into sustainability is because that entire corporation, the mission is really to create something for the upcoming generations. So it's owned by Swedish farmers. They really like uh, into innovation and to create the next kind of generation of farming and agriculture. So I got to sit next to the sustainability department. And when you have that, you can just ask all the stupid questions that you want to ask. And not only that, they could also ask me, when we want to communicate those things, how can we say it in a way that people will actually understand? So from 2011, I really did a deep dive into see what is the role of sustainability in a company. And if we look what happens all around the globe right now, we can all see that we have a challenge when it comes to environmental sustainability, but also to social. So for me, it's been really important to see it's not only us as individuals or the government who have a responsibility. I think all companies also have a responsibility of taking responsibility for their supply chain, for the products they develop. Sometimes maybe the products they're not developing because they can create a service instead of a product.
Right.
Or they might not have to do a new product. They might create a better experience around the product, and that's how they scale. So there's a lot of things that we can do as brand and companies to contribute to make the world a little bit better, both for the planet and for people and for animals. So for me, it's not been like a nice to know. It's like a need to know. If I'm going to be someone who helps brand develop in the future, I need to know more about this. So that's kind of the background for me. And so for me, it's been just very like, and also we won like #1 sustainable brand in Sweden 2 times. So I got to see a lot of like other brands and how they work and look into case studies. So for me, what I learned from that is that I don't need to be an expert, because I'm not a subject matter expert when it comes to sustainability, and I should not be that either. As a strategist, I put on the hat of the customer, and I want to understand how can the brand help customers, inform them about doing better choices, and maybe nudge their behavior in a more sustainable way. That's what I'm good at, helping them to see and then translate that over into communication or to design. So what I'm saying when I focus on sustainability is not, you don't need to be an expert. People get nervous, like, I don't know enough. But if you know how to facilitate and you know how to do some basic research, you will know enough. Because the important thing is that you know how to facilitate with the subject matter experts at your client's company. So that's how I approach it.
100%. You're right. I mean, just thinking about it, that there was a time when you can say that customer empathy was kind of a trend, that, and then slowly people were like, well, why it's a trend? Shouldn't it be the most foundational thing about a business? People were like, yeah, it makes sense. It should be.
Yeah.
And so the same with sustainability. It slowly started creeping in. Some used it for marketing tactics, but now that we see it, it of course makes sense, and it has to be a sustainable, it has to be a constant effort and a part of business in a way, right?
Yes, it needs to be super integrated. And I also think that we have a responsibility as creatives and strategists to not just blame companies and brands all the time. I don't think that helps to just call out people and write on social media. We also responsible if we help them purpose wash or greenwash. We're also responsible for that. So I call it like putting lipstick on a pig. For me, that's when you make things look pretty, but they're not really good, you know? So for me, it's always been really important to know that people are doing the hard work first, and then I can help them to communicate about it. So it doesn't mean that they have to be perfect. We can be transparent. We can be very vulnerable in our conversation and say, we're actually not really good at this. We are aware, we take responsibility, and this is how we do it. We like people who are not perfect. So why don't we like brands that are not perfect? I think
Makes
that's
total sense, yeah.
I think there's a scarcity and like a fear in a lot of corporates that they want to look perfect, but people don't like perfect. neither with personal brand or with companies. And if someone pretend to be perfect, we just want to call them out and see what they're doing wrong.
Mhm.
So I think
You're
this
right.
is the challenge also that we have to maybe use a little bit of our more to influence people, to have the guts to be a little bit more vulnerable and transparent in their communication.
Right. I think that would be helpful for both of us, for the customers and also from the brand side. It makes sense.
Yes, we're on a journey, and why not share
Mm.
that with the audience? Maybe the audience can be part of co-creation and coming up with things too.
Mhm. Amazing. This was such a fun conversation. Towards the end, since we're doing this at this time, I would have to ask your opinion on this. And it's fine if you don't want to give an opinion. But what's your thoughts on the PayPal rebranding?
Oh my God. I have not, to be honest, I have not really looked into it so much. And
Mhm.
to answer like a true strategist, I don't also want to give an opinion about how things just look like. I kind of
Right.
want to understand the reason behind it, why they do it. And when I know that, and when I talk to someone who's been doing this strategy, then I feel like I can actually have an opinion about how it looks like and what they say.
Mhm. That makes total sense because I think a lot of the backlash comes from maybe junior designers, or I mean, I'm not totally sure, and I shouldn't, paint it with a white brush. But at the same time, from a strategy perspective, it just made sense for PayPal to have this brand communication now because of there's huge competition now. So
Yeah.
if you kind of just stay as a legacy brand, it doesn't help. And the safest way for a brand communication is some sort of a brand refresh. So they've come with a more contrasting color palette, and the logo is more adaptable. So I think they'll go for more physical brand touch points, maybe sponsorships and all of
Hmm.
those. But all of those things get hidden under this layer that, oh, that I don't like the logo or something.
Yeah, I think people, what I want to say about that is like, check in with yourself. When you have an opinion like that, I
Mm-hmm.
would check in with yourself and think about, okay, let me pause here. Why do I feel this way right now? Am I reacting to a visual identity right now? And also, do I really know the strategy behind it? Do I know their challenges? Do I know the reason? Because we're talking about a really big brand that have a really big budget and really good people who actually make decisions. So kind of, who do you think you are as a beginner critiquing something when you have no idea about the strategy behind it? It's like
And
a
I'll be, yeah.
humble check-in, like, maybe you could learn something from this instead. So instead of critiquing it, maybe trying to break it down and to understand. Okay, so they changed this. What does that mean? What is the reason behind that? And do some research, but maybe that is the really good lesson here.
You're completely right because I think it's in design where we remove all the levels of complexity and think just we can just critique it. I mean, I'll be honest, if anything, I believe in pentagram more than me for anything. Right. So you're right.
Yes,
Taking that inner look as in, am I making this decision out of just
yes,
reaction to design, or is it something more concrete?
yes. And I mean, to add to that, it's impossible to do a brand identity, a logo and brand identity, if you don't have a strategy first.
Hmm.
Because it will just be about how it looks like. And that is not design for me, that's art. And that's the difference.
Completely.
Design needs to solve a problem. And you don't have a problem to solve unless you have a brand strategy first. So that's my encouragement to everyone is like, if you work with brand identity and you're a designer, you are such an important person in the future because today advertising is more and more difficult to do. I believe that design will be the core of everything. It will create
Hmm.
how we stand out, how we are recognized, how we create experiences. But not only that, it will also help us nudge the behavior we want to nudge in people. So if we want people to eat more vegan, just think about how design can actually make a difference in that. So I think it could be messaging on packaging, it could be so many things. Just take this, for example, which is a Swedish brand,
Hmm.
Oatly. I love Oatly as a brand. They have amazing communication, their campaigns. They also have great messaging on their packaging. They're talking about sustainability. They talk about their heritage, their story, where they're from. This is good design when you actually use a package to tell a story and to position yourself. So it's not just about how pretty things look. It's actually about position yourself. So I think a lot of designers could really benefit from learning how to do this. And that's why I do it, because I can see this amazing future for designers where we need more right brainers in a left brain world and more intuition and creative thinking and imagination.
Totally. And the Oatly rebranding kind of makes me want to shout out a brand from India. It's called The Whole Truth.
Okay.
And it's exactly that. It's the whole truth. So the front of the packaging, it's a chocolate brand. And the front of the packaging itself says that the whole truth, the logo,
Yeah.
is that. And it'll just go into a sentence.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah,
I
and
love that.
that's not just for the sake of a brave packaging. That's their entire code. That's how the
Yes.
founder works.
Yes.
And it's so amazing to see this actually happen.
So this would be really good case studies for you to write about and for other designers to show us an example, because maybe other companies want to follow in their steps when they see the value, what it can bring to people.
Yes. Amazing. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you for giving your time, because you were one of my dream guests and now it's a checklist. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope that if I could give people a free gift from me, it would be like, if you go to my website, annelihansson.com,
Yes.
I have 176 pages ebook about my brand strategy framework, and it's totally free. And you can download it there. And that's my gift to people in the beginning of their career, because maybe you can get a little bit more insight about what brand strategy is and especially how I do it. So that's, yeah, you're welcome to do that if you're interested.
Awesome. Yes. I'll link it all in the description. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is
Thank you
great.
so much. Thank you,
Bye.
guys. Bye.